Madagascar remains one of animation's most beloved animated trilogies, celebrated for its vibrant cast, diverse setting, and endlessly quotable dialogue. And while the main cast of Alex, Marty, Gloria, and Melman would eventually wear out their welcome, Madagascar will birth 4 characters who were made for spin-off material. Skipper, the charismatic leader who may secretly have a fetish for dolls. Kowalski, the brains of the operation who, funnily enough, can't read. Rico, the bloodthirsty psychopath. And Private, the adorable mascot of the crew who secretly yearns to be more than what he is. So join me as I go through a story of how 4 penguins became more iconic than Madagascar itself. The penguins are well known for their adventures in Madagascar, but very few people know if they originally came to be through a pitch for a DreamWorks film called Rockumentary, which featured them as some sort of rock bands. Ultimately, the film was scrapped due to licensing issues and the likes, but director Eric Darnell had the idea to bring the penguins back in Madagascar, retooling them to this commando unit that gets shit done. But it's clear to me that the head honchos behind Madagascar didn't exactly foresee their success, and it's most evident with the voice cast. You see, Madagascar was one of those films that got big names for pretty much every lead character, with Ben Stiller as Alex, Chris Rock as Marty, Jada Pinkett Smith as Gloria, and David Schwimmer as Melman. For the penguins, however, they went for the cheap route when it came to acting, with Skipper and Kowalski being voiced by the 2 directors, and Private being voiced by a lesser known actor. Yet in spite of that, the penguins gained a cult following among watchers, with there being a general desire to see them in a more prominent role. And with the DVD release, we got a teaser of what that'd be like through an animated Christmas short about the penguins as they attempt to retrieve Private from some old lady who quote-unquote kidnaps him. And while 2008 marked the release of Madagascar Escape to Africa, which gave the penguins more prominence within the plot, it was also the year they got their own spin-off show called The Penguins of Madagascar, which put the penguins in wacky situations as they tried to protect their home in the zoo. And while I won't be covering that in this video due to not watching it all, it was pretty good shit from what I remember. This was then followed up by 2012's Madagascar 3, which took the penguins' antics to the extreme, and with it, and the Penguins of Madagascar show doing incredibly well, DreamWorks decided to finally give the people what they wanted, a film focused entirely on the penguins called Penguins of Madagascar, which aimed to flesh out the penguins even further. So let's dive into each piece of media individually, exploring the character arc of the penguins in each. This film has the most insignificant penguin story by a long shot, as they only really appear for about 10 minutes. In spite of that though, they managed to create a lasting impression, with Skipper getting the most prominent role. Their whole arc at the beginning consists of trying to escape the zoo in order to go back to Antarctica, and after a series of mishaps, they eventually get there and realize it sucks dick. So they instead join the main cast in Madagascar, which was probably the writers forced them back into the fray once they realized how well they worked off the main cast. The penguins end up helping out with the Fuso issue, and even provide a solution to Alex's hunger issues, ending Madagascar by smiling and waving to the animals that they attempt to start a boat with no gas. As a whole though, their role here was pretty insignificant all things considered. Only Skipper has any sort of meaningful contributions to the plot, and the others don't get enough screen time to show off their more interesting traits. However, that was all about to change with... This is where the personalities of these characters truly began to shine, with each penguin settling into the role they'd assume in future movies. The whole premise of this film is that Private gets kidnapped and it's up to the rest of the crew to save him. Seeing as it's a 6-minute short, there isn't really much room for character development. However, there are 2 things that stick out to me. Number 1 is Private's compassion for this random polar bear, as it gives us a glimpse onto the arc he'd have in future movies. And number 2, Rico's obsession with blowing shit up.
Kaboom!
Yes, Rico. Kaboom!
On the whole though, a really enjoyable show that gave us a glimpse of what the penguins could do if given the spotlight. And DreamWorks must have realised this too, because... Madagascar Escape to Africa was the first movie in the franchise to really begin pushing the penguins, as they're heavily involved throughout. In spite of their increased role and more pronounced personalities however, they're still kinda repeating their bebop from the first film, with them trying to fix the plane in the background while the main cast reunite with their kind in Africa. They're probably still the best part of this movie though, as their personalities blend together so well and lead to some utterly hilarious one-liners.
The plane won't be fixed until the suits meet our demands. Now, about maternity leave.
Maternity leave? You're all males.
Madagascar 3 was the last film in the mainline trilogy, and the one where the penguins assume their biggest roles yet as they're central to the first act of the film where they must escape from a crazed bounty hunter who wants Alex's head. And while this film is quite mediocre after the brilliant chase sequence, the Penguins do their best to make it watchable, with them stealing the spotlight every time they're on screen. DreamWorks oddly never made another Madagascar movie, which is weird considering how financially successful a trilogy was for them. However, the Penguins did get their own movie, called... Whereas the first three films treated the Penguins as more of a B-plot, with more one-note personalities to boot, this one gives each character an arc, with all of them growing as characters by the end. Well, three of them anyway. Rico's pretty much the same twisted, deranged, demented psychopath he's always been. Skipper learns to accept that he may not always have the answers through Agent Classified, reminding him that his cause got Private captured, and that arc is vindicated by him stepping back and allowing Private to take command of the final operation. Kowalski goes through a mini love story, as he humorously falls for his Eva and tries winning her over through their shared smarts. Fortunately for him, this is a kids film, so he ends up winning in that regard. Without question though, the MVP of this entire movie is Private, as he goes through a self-discovery arc of sorts. The team regard him very little from a value point of view, either being used as a distraction while the main trio gets shit done, or being a punching bag to a joke. As a result of that though, he begins to question his importance in this film, with none of the others really understanding what he feels like. And throughout the film, he tries to prove his value, only for the crew to reduce him to being the cute and cuddly mascot. However, the last 30 or so minutes of the film focus on Private and how valuable he is as a member, using the best qualities of each penguin to do so. Rico's swallowing ability save him from becoming a mutant freak, or possibly death thinking about it. Kowalski's smarts help him to devise a plan to save all the penguins. Skipper's charisma and leadership allow him to command situations he wouldn't have been able to previously, and his cuteness becomes a central part of the plan that eventually saves his entire race. And when Private gets stripped of his cuteness towards the end, which was seen as his defining trait for so long, Skipper finally sees the value he brings to the team, and gives him the validation he's been so eager for.
Yes, sir? You are the most meaningful and valued member of this team.
Truly fantastic stuff. What started off as a filler edition DreamWorks put next to no stock in ended up being the most iconic part of the Madagascar franchise, even headlining their own film and series. And while audiences may have grown fatigued of Alex, Marty, Gloria and Melman, I don't think people ever got tired of the Penguins. In fact, I reckon they want more of them. And in an age where reboots are becoming increasingly common, and a timeline where Puss in Boots got the revival of the century, I see no reason why the Penguins shouldn't make a return to the cinematic scene. If DreamWorks do end up going through with this, and treat it with the same love and care they treated The Last Wish with, we could be in for one of animation's greatest ever films.